Peace, love, and light, family. It's your girl, Morgan Renee Myers, tuning in with you all for another reading of Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. I am on chapter 9 at this point. Shout out to my YouTube followers. I've been getting requests for shout outs and I normally ignore them, but this person asks so politely and then they apologize for asking, so I'm going to give them a shout out. Battle Cat, shout out to you for subscribing to my channel and enjoying the book. Now, I want y'all youth to actually read along if possible, and reading is fundamental and it will take you far. So don't just depend on coming to YouTube looking for people to read to y'all. I know people's reading levels vary. Some struggle more than others, but it's important to also do your own due diligence and try to learn the words, because reading and looking at it will help you in your everyday life. I'm telling you this as an adult. I didn't struggle with reading. I always loved reading, but I'm telling you this as an adult. There'll be things in life. Reading helps you think, critically think. It helps you context clues. It helps you foreshadow things that happen in real life. So that's my spiel. I'm going to hop right into it, all right? Chapter 9, Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry, by Mildred D. Taylor. Spring. It seeped unseen into the waiting red earth in early March, softening the hard ground for the coming plow and awakening life that had lain gently sleeping through the cold winter. But by the end of March, it was evident everywhere. In the barn, where 3 new calves bellowed and chicks the color of soft pale sunlight chirped. In the yard, where the wisteria and English dogwood bushes readied themselves for their annual Easter bloom. What is wisteria? Y'all know I gotta look up words. Wisteria.
Here's a summary from Wikipedia. Wisteria is a genus of flowering plants in the legume family, Fabaceae, that includes 10 species of woody climbing vines.
Okay. So a plant. They're beautiful. Y'all should Google it and look at the pictures. They're real pretty. And this, when you do that, when you look up words you don't know, you're learning the word, you're learning the context of where it came from, and you might learn something about your world you never knew. So next time you're out frolicking in nature, you might see some wisteria. I'm like, oh, that's wisteria. How you know? Because I read Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry, and they talked about wisteria, and Miss Morgan looked it up, and that's how I know. Okay, back to where we was at. So by the end of March, it was evident everywhere. In the barn, where 3 new cows bellowed and chicks the color of soft pale sunlight chirped. In the yard, where the wisteria and English dogwood bushes readied themselves for their annual Easter bloom. And the fig tree budded, producing the forerunners of juicy brown fruit, for which the boys and I would have to do battle with fig-loving Jack. And in the smell of the earth itself, rain-drenched, fresh, vital, and full of life, spring enveloped us all. I was eager to be in the fields again, to feel the furrowed rows of damp, soft earth beneath my feet, eager to walk barefooted through the cool forest, hug the trees, and sit under their protective shadow. I'm a tree hugger, too. But although every living thing knew it was spring, Miss Crocker and the other teachers evidently did not, for school lingered on indefinitely. In the last week of March, when Papa and Mr. Morrison began to plow the east field, I volunteered to sacrifice school and help them. My offer was refused, and I trudged wearily to school for another week. I guess I won't be seeing much of y'all after next Friday, said Jeremy one evening as we neared his forest trail. Guess not, said Stacy. Be nice if our schools ended at the same time. You crazy, I cried, remembering that Jefferson Davis didn't dismiss until mid-May. Jeremy stammered an apology. I just meant we could still see each other. He was silent a moment, then brightened. Maybe I can come over to see y'all sometime. Stacy shook his head. Don't think Pa would like that. Well, I just thought, he shrugged. She'll be lonely without y'all. Lonely? I asked. With all them brothers and sisters you got? Jeremy frowned. The little ones, they too young to play with. And the older ones, Lily and Jean and R.W. and Melvin, I guess I don't like them very much. What you saying? Asked Stacy. You can't not like your own brothers and sisters. You can't not like your own sister and brothers. Well, I can understand that, I said soberly. I sure don't like them. But they're his kin. A fellow's gotta like his own kin. Jeremy thought about that. Well, Lily and Jean's all right, I guess. She ain't so persnickety since Cassie stopped being her friend. He smiled a secret smile to himself. But that R.W. and Melvin, they ain't very nice. You ought to see how they treat TJ. He halted, looked up embarrassed, and was quiet. Stacy stopped. How they treat him? Jeremy stopped too. I don't know, he said as if he was sorry he had mentioned it. They just don't do him right. How? Asked Stacy. Thought you didn't like him no more. Well, I don't, replied Stacy defensively. But I heard he was running around with R.W. and Melvin. I wondered why. Them brothers of yours must be 18 or 19. Jeremy looked up at the sun, squinted, then glanced by his forest trail a few feet ahead. They brung TJ by the house a couple of times when Pa wasn't home. They treated him almost friendly-like, but when he left, they laughed and talked about him, called him names. He squinted again at the trail and said hurriedly, I better go. See y'all tomorrow. Mama, how come you suppose R.W. and Melvin putting in time with TJ? I asked as I measured out 2 heaping tablespoons of flour for the cornbread. Mama frowned down into the flour barrel. Only 1 tablespoon, Cassie, and not so heaping. But, Mama, we always use 2. That barrel will have to last us until Papa goes back to the railroad. Now put it back. Now put it back. As I returned 1 tablespoon of flour to the barrel, I again asked, What you think, Mama? How come them Simses is running around with TJ? Mama measured out the baking powder and gave it to me. It was a teaspoon less than what we had been using, but I didn't ask her about it. It was running low, too. I don't really know, Cassie, she said, turning to the stove to stir milk into the butter beans. They may just want him around because it makes them feel good. When TJ's around me, he don't make me feel good. Well, you told me Jeremy said they were laughing at TJ behind his back. Some folks just like to keep other folks around to laugh at them. Use them. I wonder how come TJ don't know they laughing at him. You suppose he's that dumb? TJ's not dumb, Cassie. He just wants attention, but he's going after it the wrong way. I was going to ask what use TJ could possibly be to anyone, but I was interrupted by little man running into the kitchen. Mama, he cried, Mr. Jameson just drove up. He had been in the barn cleaning the chicken coop with Christopher John, and stubby particles of straw still clung to his head. I grinned at his amused appearance, but he did must or muse. Have to look it up. I think it's must. Must. Why I say it like that? No.
Here's the definition.
No. Mused. Nope, that's not it. Let me spell it. It's M-U-S-S-E-D. I've never heard this word before. Okay, let's see what it say. Must.
Must.
Okay, so must. Make someone's hair or clothes untidy or messy. Synonyms are ruffled, tousled, disheveled, rumpled. So must. Okay, his hair was mussed up. I grinned at his must appearance, but didn't have time to tease him before he was gone again. Mama looked at Big Ma, a question in her eyes, then followed Little Man outside. I decided that the cornbread couldn't wait and dashed after them. Oh, that the cornbread could wait and dashed after them. Sorry, guys. Girl, get back in here and finish mixing this cornbread, ordered Big Ma. Yes'm, I said. I'll be right back. Before Big Ma could reach me, I was out the back door running across the yard to the drive. Mr. Jameson touched his hat as Mama approached. How you doing, Ms. Logan? He asked. Just fine, Mr. Jameson, Mama answered. And yourself? Fine, he said absently. Is David here? He's over in the east field. Mama studied Mr. Jameson. Anything wrong? Oh, no, I just wanted to speak to him. Little man, Mama said, turning. Go get Papa. Oh, no, don't do that. I'll just walk over there if that's all right. I need to exercise. Mama nodded, and after she had spoken to me, Mr. Jameson crossed the yard to the field. Little man and I started to follow after him, but Mama called us back and returned us to our jobs. Mr. Jameson did not stay long. A few minutes later, he emerged from the field alone, got into his car, and left. When supper was ready, I eagerly grabbed the iron bell before Christopher John or Little Man could claim it and ran onto the back porch to summon Papa, Mr. Morrison, and Stacy from the fields. As the 3 of them washed up onto the back porch, Mama went to the end of the porch where Papa stood alone. What did Mr. Jameson want? She asked, her voice barely audible. Papa took the towel Mama handed him, but did not reply immediately. I was just inside the kitchen dipping out the butter beans. I moved closer to the window so that I could hear his answer. Don't keep anything from me, David. If there's trouble, I want to know. Papa looked down at her. Nothing to worry about, honey. Just seems that Thurston Wallace been in town talking about he's not going to let a few smart colored folks ruin his business. Says he's going to put a stop to the shopping in Vicksburg, that's all. Mama sighed and stared out across the plowed field to the sloping pasture land. I'm feeling scared, David, she said. Papa put down the towel. Not yet, Mary. It's not time to be scared yet. They're just talking. Mama turned and faced him. And when they stop talking, then maybe it'll be time. But right now, pretty lady, he said, leading her by the hand toward the kitchen door. Right now, I've got better things to think about. Quickly, I poured the rest of the butter beans into the bowl and hurried across the kitchen to the table. As Mama and Papa entered, I slid onto the bench beside Little Man and Christopher John. Papa beamed down at the table. Well, look at here, he exclaimed. Good old butter beans and cornbread. You better come on, Mr. Morrison. You too, son, he called. These woman folks done gone and fixed us a feast. All right, sorry, y'all. I had got a phone call I had to take. All right. Quickly, I poured the rest of the butter beans into the bowl and hurried across the kitchen to the table. As Mama and Papa entered, I slid onto the bench beside Little Man and Christopher John. Papa beamed down at the table. Well, look at here, he exclaimed. Good old butter beans and cornbread. You better come on, Mr. Morrison. You too, son, he called. These women folks done gone and fixed us a feast. After school was out, spring drooped quickly towards summer, yet Papa had not left for the railroad. He seemed to be waiting for something, and I secretly hoped that whatever that something was, it would never come, so that he would not leave. But one evening, as he, Mama, Big Mom, Mr. Morrison, and Stacy sat on the front porch while Christopher John, Little Man, and I dashed around the yard chasing fireflies, I overheard him say, Sunday I'm going to have to go. Don't want to, though. I got this gut feeling it ain't over yet. It's too easy. I released the firefly imprisoned in my hand and sat beside Papa and Stacy on the steps. Papa, please, I said, leaning against his leg, don't go this year. Stacy looked out into the falling night, his face resigned, and said nothing. Papa put out his large hand and caressed my face. Got to, Cassie girl, he said softly. Baby, there's bills to pay and ain't no money coming in. Your mama's got no job come fall, and there's the mortgage and next year's taxes to think of. But, Papa, we planted more cotton this year. Won't that pay the taxes? Papa shook his head. With Mr. Morrison here, we was able to plant more, but that cotton is for living on. The railroad money is for the taxes and the mortgage. I looked back at Mama, wanting her to speak, to persuade him to stay. But when I saw her face, I knew that she would not. She had known he would leave, just as we all known he had. Just as we all had known. She had known he would leave, just as we all had known. Papa, just another week or two, couldn't you? I can't, baby. May have lost my job already. But Papa, Cassie, that's enough now, Mama said from the deepening shadows. I grew quiet, and Papa put his arms around Stacy and me, his hands falling casually over our shoulders. From the edge of the lawn where Little Man and Christopher John had ventured after lightning bugs, Little Man called, Somebody's coming. A few minutes later, Mr. Avery and Mr. Lanier emerged from the dusk and walked up the sloping lawn. Mama sent Stacy and me to get more chairs for the porch. Then we settled back beside Papa, still sitting on the steps, his back propped against a pillar facing the visitors. You going up to the store tomorrow, David? Mr. Avery asked after all the amenities had been said. Since the first trip in January, Mr. Morrison had made one other trip to Vicksburg, but Papa had not gone with him. Papa motioned to Mr. Morrison. Mr. Morrison and me going the day after tomorrow. Your wife brought down that list of things you need yesterday. Mr. Avery cleared his throat nervously. It's that list I come about, David. I don't want them things no more. The porch grew silent. When no one said anything, Mr. Avery glanced at Mr. Lanier. Mr. Lanier shook his head and continued. Mr. Granger making it hard on us, David. Said we're going to have to give him 60% of the cotton instead of 50 now that the cotton's planted and it's too late to plant more. Don't suppose, though, that it makes much difference. The way cotton sells these days seems the more we plant, the less money we get anyways. Mr. Avery's coughing interrupted him, and he waited patiently until the coughing had stopped before he went on. I'm going to be hard put to pay the debt in Vicksburg, David, but I'm going to. I want you to know that. Papa nodded, looking toward the road. I suppose Montier and Harrison raised their percentages too, he said. Montier did, replied Mr. Avery, but far as I know, Mr. Harrison ain't. He's a decent man. That does it, Mama sighed wearily. Papa kept looking out into the darkness. 40%. I expect a man used to living on 50 could live on 40 if he wanted to hard enough. Mr. Avery shook his head. Times too hard. Times are hard for everybody, Papa said. Mr. Avery cleared his throat. I know. I feel real bad about what TJ done. I wasn't talking about that, said Papa flatly. Mr. Avery nodded self-consciously, then leaned forward in his chair and looked out into the forest. But that ain't all, Mr. Granger said. Said, too, we don't give up this shopping in Vicksburg. We can just get off his land. Says he tired of us stirring up trouble against decent white folks. Then them Wallaces, they come by my place. Brother Laniers and everybody's on this thing that owes them money. Said we can't pay our debts. They're going to have the sheriff out to get us. Put us on the chain gang to work it off. Oh, good Lord, exclaimed Big Ma. Mr. Lanier nodded and added, gotta go up to that store by tomorrow to show good faith. Mr. Avery's coughing started again, and for a while there was only the coughing and the silence. But when the coughing ceased, Mr. Lanier said, I pray to God there was a way we could stay in this thing, but we can't go on no chain gang, David. Papa nodded. Don't expect you to, Silas. Mr. Avery laughed softly. We sure had him going for a time, though, didn't we? Yes, agreed Papa quietly. We sure did. When the men had left, Stacy snapped, they got no right pulling out. Just 'cause them Wallaces threatened them one time, they go jumping all over themselves to get out like a bunch of scared jackrabbits. Papa stood suddenly and grabbed Stacy upward. You, boy, don't you get so grown you go to talking about more than you know. Them men, they doing what they gotta do. You got any idea what a risk they took just to go shopping in Vicksburg in the first place? They go on that chain gang and their families got nothing. They'll get kicked off that plot of land they tend to, and there'll be no place for them to go. You understand that? Yes, sir, said Stacy. Papa released him and stared moodily into the night. You were born blessed, boy, with land of your own. If you hadn't been, you'd cry out for it while you tried. If you hadn't been, you'd cry out for it while you try to survive, like Mr. Lanier and Mr. Avery. Maybe even do what they're doing now. It's hard on a man to give up, but sometimes it seems there just ain't nothing else he can do. I'm sorry, Papa, Stacy muttered. After a moment, Papa reached out and draped his arm around Stacy's shoulder. Papa, I said, standing to join them. We giving up too? Papa looked down at me and brought me closer, then waved his hand toward the drive. You see that fig tree over yonder, Casey? Cassie. I keep saying Casey, y'all. I've been saying Cassie this whole time, and now I'm calling her Casey. Cassie. You see that fig tree over yonder, Cassie? Them other trees all around. That oak and walnut. They're a lot bigger, and they take up more room and give you so much shade that they almost overshadow that little old fig. But that fig tree's got roots that run deep, and it belongs in that yard as much as that oak and walnut. It keeps on blooming, bearing good fruit year after year, knowing all the time it'll never get as big as them other trees. Just keeps on growing and doing what it gotta do. It don't give up. It give up, it'll die. There's a lesson to be learned from that little tree, Cassie girl, 'cause we're like it. We keep doing what we gotta, and we don't give up. We can't. After Mr. Morrison had retired to his own house and Big Ma, the boys, and I had gone to bed, Papa and Mama remained on the porch talking in hushed whispers. It was comforting listening to them. Mama's voice a warm, lilting murmur. Lilting? What does that mean? I think it means soft. Lilting. Lilting. Lilting.
Here's the definition of lilt. Speak, sing, or sound with a lilt.
Well, what is a lilt? Speak, sing, or sound. What's a lilt? A lilt is a characteristic rising and falling of the voice when speaking, a pleasant, gentle accent. So cadence, inflection, tempo. Okay, a little lilt. Got a little lilt in the voice. Okay, Mama. Mama's voice was a warm, lilting murmur. Papa's a quiet, easy flowing hum. After a few minutes, they left the porch and their voices grew faint. I climbed from the bed, careful not to awaken Big Ma, and went to the window. They were walking slowly across the moon-soaked grass, their arms around each other. First thing tomorrow, I'm going to go around and see how many folks are still in this thing, Papa said, stopping under the oak near the house. I want to know before we make that trip to Vicksburg. Mama was quiet a moment. I don't think you and Mr. Morrison should go to Vicksburg right now, David. Not with the Wallaces threatening people like they are. Wait a while. Papa reached into the tree and broke off a twig. We can't just stop taking care of business because of them Wallaces, Mary. You know that. Mama did not reply. Papa leaned against the tree. I think I'll take Stacy with me. Now, David, no, he'll be 13 next month, honey, and he needs to be with me more. I can't take him with me on the railroad, but I can take him with me where I go around here, and I want him to know business, how to take care of it, how to take care of things when I ain't around. David, he's just a boy, baby. A boy get as big as Stacy down here, and he's near a man. He's got to know a man's things. He got to know how to handle himself. I know, but Mary, I want him strong, not a fool like TJ. He got more brains and learning than that, Mama snapped. I know, Papa said quietly. Still, it worries me, seeing TJ turning like he is. Seems to me it isn't bothering Joe Avery much. He don't seem to be doing anything about it. Papa allowed the silence to seep between them before he said, It's not like you, honey, to be bitter. I'm not bitter, said Mama, folding her arms across her chest. It's just that the boy's gotten out of hand and doesn't seem like anybody's doing anything about it. The other day, Joe told me he couldn't do nothing with TJ anymore. That's a hard thing for a man to admit. He can still put a good strip of leather against his bottom, can he? It was clear that Mama was unsympathetic to Mr. Avery's problem. Said he tried, but his health so poor he ended up with a bad coughing spell. Got so sick from it he had to go to bed. He said that Fanny tried to whip the boy, but TJ's stronger than her and it didn't do no good. Papa paused, then added, He's gotten pretty sassy, too, I understand. Well, sassy or not, Mama grumbled. They'd better figure out some way of getting that boy back on the right track because he's headed for a whole lot of trouble. Papa sighed heavily and left the tree. We better go in. I've got an early start if I'm going to get round to everybody. You still set on going to Vicksburg. I told you I was. Mama laughed lightly in exasperation. Sometimes, David Logan, I wonder why I didn't marry sweet, quiet Ronald Carter or nice, mild Harold Davis. Because, woman, Papa said, putting his arm around her, you took one look at a big, handsome me and no one else would do. They both laughed and together moved slowly to the side of the house. 7 families, including ours, still refused to shop at the Wallace store, even with the threat of the chain gang. Mama said that the number was not significant enough to hurt the Wallaces, only enough to rile them, and she worried, afraid for Papa, Stacy, and Mr. Morrison to make the trip. But nothing she could say could change Papa's mind, and they left us playing on Wednesday morning long before dawn. On Thursday, when they were to return, it began to rain, a hard, swelling summer rain, which brought a premature green darkness to the land and forced us to leave our hoeing of the cotton field and returning to the house. As the thunder rumbled overhead, Mama peered out the window at the dark road. Wonder what's keeping them, she said, more to herself than anyone else. Probably got held up someplace, said Big Ma. Could have stopped to get out this storm. Mama turned from the window. You're most likely right, she agreed, picking up a pair of Christopher John's pans to mend. As the evening fell into total darkness, we grew silent, the boys and I saying very little, Mama and Big Ma concentrating on their sewing, their brows furrowed. My throat grew tight, and without knowing why I was afraid, I was. Mama, I said, they all right, ain't they? Mama stared down at me. Of course they all right. They're just late, that's all. But, Mama, you suppose maybe somebody didn't... I think you children better go on to bed, Mama said sharply without letting me finish. But I want to wait up for Papa, objected little man. Me too, said sleepy Christopher John. You'll see him in the morning. Now get to bed. Since there was nothing we could do but obey, we went to bed. But I could not sleep. A cold fear crept up my body, churning my stomach and tightening its grip on my throat. Finally, when I felt that I was going to be sick from it, I rose and padded silently into Mama and Papa's room. Mama was standing with her back to me, her arms folded, and Big Ma was still patching. Neither of them heard the door swing open. I started to speak, but Mama was talking, and I decided not to interrupt her. I've got a good mind to saddle a lady and go looking for them, she said. Now, Mary, what good would that do? Big Ma questioned. You run around out there on that mare by yourself in the dark and rain. But something's happened to them. I can feel it. It's just in your mind, child, Big Ma scoffed unconvincingly. Them men's folk all right. No, said Mama, shaking her head. The Wallaces aren't just in their mind. She stopped suddenly and stood very still. The Wallaces aren't just in my mind. She stopped suddenly and stood very still. Mary, thought I heard something. The dog started barking and she turned, half running, across the room. Pushing up the lock in a mad haste, she swung the door open and cried into the storm. David! David! Unable to stay put, I dashed across the room. Cassie, what you doing up, girl? Asked Big Ma, swatting me as I passed her. But Mama, staring into the wet night, said nothing when I reached her side. Is it them? I asked. Out of the darkness, a round light appeared, moving slowly across the drive, and Mr. Morrison's voice drifted softly to us. Go on, Stacy, he said. I got him. Then Stacy, a flashlight in his hand, came into sight, followed by Mr. Morrison carrying Papa. David! Mama gasped, her voice a frightened whisper. Big Ma, standing behind me, stepped back, pulling me with her. She stripped the bed to its sheets and ordered, Put him right here, Mr. Morrison. As Mr. Morrison climbed the stairs, we could see that Papa's left leg stuck straight out, immobilized by his shotgun strapped to it with a rope. His head was wrapped in a rag through which the dark redness of his blood had seeped. Mr. Morrison eased Papa through the doorway, careful not to hit the strag leg, and laid him gently on the bed. Mama went immediately to the bed and took Papa's hand. Hey, baby, Papa said faintly. I'm all right. Just got my leg broke, that's all. Wagon rolled over it, said Mr. Morrison, avoiding Mama's eyes. We better get that leg set. Didn't have time on the road. But his head, Mama said, her eyes questioning Mr. Morrison. But Mr. Morrison said nothing further, and Mama turned to Stacy. You all right, son? Yes'm, Stacy said, his face strangely ashen, his eyes on Papa. Then get out of those wet things. Don't want you catching pneumonia. Cassie, you go to bed. I'll get a fire started, said Big Ma, disappearing into the kitchen as Mama turned to the closet to find sheets for making a cast. But Stacy and I remained rooted, watching Papa, and did not move until Christopher John and Little Man made a sleepy entrance. What's going on? Asked Little Man, frowning into the light. Go back to bed, children, Mama said, rushing to keep them from coming farther into the room. But before she could reach them, Christopher John spied Papa on the bed and shot past her. Papa, you got back. Mr. Morrison swung him upward before he could jar the bed. What's the matter? Asked Christopher John, wide awake now. Papa, what's the matter? How come you got that thing on your head? Your papa's asleep, said Mama, as Mr. Morrison set Christopher John back down. Stacy, take them back to bed and get out of those clothes. None of us stirred. Move when I tell you, Mama hissed impatiently, her face more worried than angry. Stacy herded us into the boys' room. As soon as the door closed behind us, I asked Stacy, how bad Papa hurt? Stacy felt around for the lamp, lit it, then plopped wearily on the side of the bed. We huddled around him. Well? Stacy shook his head. I don't know. His legs busted up by the whacking, and he shot. Shot? Christopher John, the Little Man, exclaimed fearfully. But I was silent, too afraid now to speak, to think. Mr. Morrison says he don't think the bullet hurt him much. Says he thinks it just hit his skin. Here. Stacy ran his forefinger along his right temple. It didn't sink in nowhere. But who shoot Papa? Asked Little Man, greatly agitated. Can't nobody just shoot Papa. Stacy stood then and motioned Christopher John and Little Man under the covers. I've said too much already. Cassie, go on to bed. I continued to sit, my mind unable to move. Cassie, go on now, like Mama said. How'd the wagon roll over him? How'd he get shot? I blurted out angrily, already plotting revenge against whoever had dared hurt our father. It says my father. Cassie, you go on to bed. Ain't moving till you tell me. I'll call Mama, he threatened. She too busy, I said, folding my arms and feeling confident he would tell me the story. He went to the door and opened it. Christopher John, Little Man, and I watched him eagerly, but he soon closed the door and came back to bed. What was they doing? Asked Little Man. Big Ma's tending Papa's head. Well, what happened out there? I repeated. Stacy sighed despairingly and sat down. We were coming back from Vicksburg when the back wheels come off, he said, his voice a hollow whisper. It was already dark, and it was raining, too, and Papa and Mr. Morrison, they thought somebody done messed with them wheels for both of them to come off at the same time like they did. Then when I told them I seen two boys near the wagon when we was in Vicksburg, Papa said we didn't have time to unhitch and unload the wagon like we should to put them wheels back on. He thought somebody was coming after us. So after we found the wheels and the bolts, Papa told me to hold the reins real tight on Jack to keep him still. Jack, he was real skittish because of the storm. Then Mr. Morrison went and lifted that wagon all by himself, and it was heavy too, but Mr. Morrison lifted it like it wasn't nothing. Then Papa slipped the first wheel on. That's when he got shot. But who? I started. A truck come up the road and stopped behind us while he was trying to get the wheel on, but didn't none of us hear it coming because of the rain and the thunder and all, and they didn't put their lights on till the truck stopped. Anyways, there was 3 men in that truck, and as soon as Papa seen him, he reached for his shotgun. That's when they shot him, and he fell back with his left leg, excuse me. That's when they shot him, and he fell back with his left leg under the wagon. Then Then Jack reared up, scared by the shot, and I couldn't hold him, and the wagon rolled over Papa's leg. His voice cracked sharply, and he exploded guiltily. It's my fault. His leg's busted. I thought on what he had said, and laying my head on his shoulder, I said, "No, it ain't. It was the men's." Stacy did not speak for a while, and I did not pry him to go on. Finally, he cleared his throat and continued huskily. Soon as I could, I tied Jack to a tree and run back to Papa, but Papa told me not to move him and to get down in the gully. After the men shot Papa, they come down trying to get Mr. Morrison, but he was too fast and strong for him. I couldn't see everything that happened because they didn't always stay in front of them headlights, but I did see Mr. Morrison pick up one of them men like he wasn't nothing but a sack of chicken feathers and fling him down on the ground so hard it must have broke his back. I ain't never seen nothing like it before in my whole life. Then one of them other two that had a shotgun shot at Mr. Morrison, but he didn't hit him. Mr. Morrison, he ducked away from the headlights into the darkness, and they went after him. Couldn't see nothing then, he said, glancing toward the door where Papa lay. Heard bones cracking, heard somebody cursing and crying. Then I couldn't hear nothing but the rain, and I was real scared, afraid they killed Mr. Morrison. But they didn't, reminded little man, his eyes bright with excitement. Stacy nodded. Next thing I seen was a man coming real slow like into the headlights and pick up the man lying in the middle of the road, the one Mr. Morrison thrown down. He got him into the truck, then come back and help the other one. That one looked like he had a broke arm. It was hanging all crazy like at his side. Then they turned the truck around and drove away. Then what? Little man inquired. Stacy shrugged. Nothing. We put on the other wheel and come on home. Who was it? I rasped, holding my breath. Stacy looked at me and said flatly, "The Wallaces, I think." There was a fearful moment's silence. Then Christopher John, tears in his dark eyes, asked, "Stacy, is Papa going to die?" "No, of course not," denied Stacy too quickly. "But he was so still. I don't want Papa to die," wailed little man. "He was just sleeping, like Mama said, that's all." "Well, when he going to wake up?" cried Christopher John, the tears escaping down his plump cheeks. In the morning," said Stacy, putting a comforting arm around both Christopher John and little man. "Just you wait and see. He'll be just fine come morning." Stacy, still in his wet, muddy clothes, said nothing else, and neither did the rest of us. All the questions had been answered, yet we feared, and we sat silently listening to the rain, soft now upon the roof, and watching the door behind which Papa lay and wished for morning. Ooh, this book getting juicy. So that was chapter 9, Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry by Mildred D. Taylor. I hope you all enjoyed it. I'll read chapter 10 again soon. Peace.